Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad that you could make it today and attend. My name is Leanne Waring, and I am with the Duke Career Center. And I want to say that today's session is actually a collaborative partnership between the Duke Civic Engagement Office and the Duke Career Center. And I am joined here today by some of my colleagues from both of those departments. And one of those colleagues is our new director of the Career Center, Greg Victory. And Greg is going to start us off by just saying a few words. So, Greg.
Good afternoon, everybody. Greetings from Duke University. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I just want to let you know how important our community partners are and how excited we are to be sharing some of our resources and ideas and thoughts with you, and hope that we can find creative ways to connect the talent that comes out of Duke with the amazing work that you're all doing to make Durham and North Carolina and the world a better place. I just wanted to pop in and say thank you for everything you're already doing. We look forward to working with you in the future. We appreciate our Durham and Community Affairs colleagues. You're going to learn a lot today from Leanne. She's put a lot of work into this presentation, and I wish you a wonderful afternoon. Ask lots of questions. We're here to sort of support you in this process. And I hope to see all of you soon. I do have I'm double booked, so I'm going to step out, but leave you in good hands with Leanne. So again, thank you for joining us today. Thanks for everything you do. And we look forward to continued partnerships with our community colleagues.
Great. Thanks, Greg. So before we begin the presentation, I just want to share that today's session is being recorded. So that way individuals that could not make it to the session can view it at a later date. Also, as Greg mentioned, your questions are very important to us. So as you're thinking of questions, please don't hesitate to go ahead and pop those into the chat box. We actually have a time set aside at the end of the presentation where we will definitely address those questions and then any other questions that you might have at that time. So let's go ahead and get started. So welcome. Today's session is Developing an Impactful Internship Program. And as I mentioned, my name is Leanne Waring, and I am with the Duke Career Center. My role in the Duke Career Center is to work with employers who are seeking students out for internships. And that can look in a couple different ways. That can be from an employer that wants to start a brand new internship to somebody who has an existing internship and wants to enhance it, to someone that has a great internship program and just wants to elevate their presence on campus. So we service employers and organizations at all different levels in terms of where they're at with their internships. So please, at any point, don't hesitate to reach out to us. And we are here as a resource, as Greg has mentioned. So let's start off today, and let's just talk first a little bit about what we mean when we say, what is an internship? Because internship is one of those terms that gets tossed around a lot, and a lot of times it's used as like a catch-all phrase for any type of experiential education that a student might be engaging in. So anything from a project to a co-op to an externship, the internship phrase or word kind of is like an umbrella for that. So we want to kind of drill down a little bit and talk a little bit more about how we define internships at Duke, so that way you just better understand, what are the experiences framed like through Duke. So we actually follow the definition that is set forth by the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and that is basically one of our professional associations that does a lot of best practices in the field. So we really take their information very seriously, and we follow basically what their protocol is. So according to the National Association of Colleges and Employers, an internship is defined, and I'm going to read this here for you, as being a form of experiential learning that integrates knowledge and theory learned in the classroom with practical application and skills development in a professional setting. Internships give students the opportunity to gain valuable applied experience and make connections in professional fields they are considering for career paths, while simultaneously giving employers the opportunity to guide and evaluate talent. Wow, that's a mouthful, right? So that's kind of the broad definition. But as we're looking at internships, there is some universal criteria that applies to them. And that's what really makes us make the differentiation between like an internship and a summer project. So some of those universal traits are, first and foremost, as a student enters into the experience, it tends to have a start and end date already identified. So it's not something that's necessarily an ongoing experience. It is a contained experience with a hard start and end date. The experience tends to be very structured with clearly identified goals and learning outcomes associated with it. It's a chance for students to gain applied knowledge or apply their knowledge from the classroom into more of a professional setting. They're in a structured experience where they're getting supervision and some mentoring and training at times, and the whole purpose is for them to, really kind of generate these skills that then will help them move into the professional workforce. But it's not all just about students. It's also about you as an organization. So, it is a two-way street. So as an employer, you're also getting assistance. And we'll talk about some of the different benefits for you as well here in just a minute by offering an internship program. So how does an internship differ from like a summer project? Really, it comes down to the length of the experience, the amount of structure around the experience and support that the student has. And also an internship is something that should consist of work that isn't necessarily work that a regular employee would be doing. So they should not be taking place of a regular employee. They may be helping a regular employee with their experience or their project, but they should not just be owning that. So we've had situations before where, employers thinking, oh, I have somebody out on maternity leave. I'll just get an intern to come in, cover that work. That's not really an internship. And we'll get into what the Department of Labor defines as internships, but really they would classify that as a job. So it's definitely something that's different from the internship criteria. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the benefits of offering, an internship. So there's going to be benefits to both the student and the employer. So when you're looking at the benefits for the students, you really, as I described before, it's a chance for them to develop professional skills, do some career exploration. But on the side of the employer, because it is a mutually beneficial experience, as an employer, you're going to be getting, some perks. So the first one, which tends to be one of the biggest perks, is that you are really getting your brand out there to students on campus, and you're establishing a pipeline for hiring talent. Students will go out into your organization, they're going to have their internship and they're going to come back and they're going to tell their friends about it. And really, that word of mouth is probably the strongest type of marketing that we can offer. Students that have a great experience, they're going to tell their friends. And next thing you know, you're going to have students seeking you out for an internship versus you marketing a program to them. So in addition to that, elevation on campus and the pipeline for hiring, of course, you're also getting to tap into some of the latest skills and innovation that's being taught in the classroom. And typically, you're going to have a very enthusiastic and passionate student who's willing to really, jump in and eager to learn. And that type of enthusiasm tends to be very contagious. So hopefully that will then help also make that, that happiness and excitement and passion for the project spread through your organization as well. And of course, you're going to get the benefit of having assistance with projects and programs. So, definitely going to have that benefit as well. So talking a little bit about internships at Duke. So, every institution has their own guidelines and expectations and policies that are set out about internships, and Duke is certainly not an exception to that. However, Duke is going to be a little bit different than some of the other institutions that you might be working with your internships. So, the biggest difference is at the undergraduate level, Duke does not typically offer academic credit for internships. So what does that mean? That means for you as an employer and as an organization, you have a little more freedom in terms of customizing the experience. So that's not to say that there's no rules or policies, but we aren't as actively tying it down as some other institutions that have internships for credit, because once you attach that credit to the experience, then there's a lot of other things that come with that in terms of minimum hours and learning objectives and approval through faculty and things like that. So you don't have that necessarily here at Duke. So while Duke does not have a strict criteria for internship details, we do recommend, some suggestions and guidelines for your experience. So let me just talk through some of these that are listed here on the slide. Typically, when I work with an employer, one of the first questions is like, well, what does an internship look like at Duke? How long is it? When is it held? Those types of questions. And, it is something that is somewhat flexible. If a student is not getting academic credit for their internship, they can actually complete an experience that is, a lot of different amount of hours. So it's really kind of up to what your needs are as an organization and what the student is also available to do. So typically we're looking at experiences most of our students are looking at are going to be between 240 hours and 400 hours. And that's going to be total amount of hours spent in the internship. And that's across however many weeks as you decide. So if you're looking at 40 hours a week, and you're looking at a 240-hour experience, that's pretty much, 40 hours a week for 6 weeks. But it could be longer than that. It doesn't have to be 40 hours a week. It could be part-time. It could be like 10 hours a week spread out over a longer period of time. Again, just as long as the student's entering it and they know the amount of hours that are involved and the start and the end date. So one thing about Duke students is that there is a culture that surrounds internships being more of a summer experience. So a lot of our students have heavy course loads that they take during the academic year. We have students from all over the world, and a lot of them do not have transportation on campus. So therefore, they tend to focus more on their coursework during the academic year and save those summer months for that valuable internship experience. So not to say that you would not be able to get a Duke intern during the academic year, just be aware that there tends to be more students that are actively looking for experiences during the summer. So in terms of the content, really the content, again, because there's not credit attached to the experience, there's not any hard rules about certain types of learning objectives that need to be involved. However, the internship should relate back to the student's academic program or their learning goals or their personal goals. So, the projects or programs that the intern is assigned, it should include professional work that's tied somehow to goals and learning outcomes that are decided between both you and the student. So that should be something that you might have drafted and then are communicated with the student and negotiate with the student so you both feel comfortable with what those goals and learning outcomes are. And while we understand that all types of work involve administrative types of tasks, trust me, email, filing, all that kind of stuff, we do say that these types of administrative tasks should only make up 20% or less of the intern's responsibilities. So definitely they should be doing that because they're going to be doing it in the professional world, but it should not be the bulk of what they are doing. So they should be having some other type of work as well as those administrative tasks. Regarding supervision and mentoring, Duke does not require that all interns, Duke does require that all interns receive some sort of supervision on a regular basis. Now, there's not any strict policies about how much time that a supervisor has to spend per week with their intern, but we do recommend that, there's regular supervision, there's mentoring involved, and there may be some training that needs to be involved as well. And again, it just depends upon what your needs are, what your project is, and also the level of student that you're working with. So we do want to make sure that our students are going out into these experiences and they're feeling supported and that they have somebody that is a point person for them if they have questions or need clarification or just need some sort of support during their experience. In regards to academic credit, I know I've said this a couple different times that there are not, is not something that undergraduate students tend to automatically get as credit for their internship. So what that means is that as a student does an internship, there's not a module within their academics that requires one that automatically gives them credit for the actual internship that they're doing. That's not to say that a student can't get credit and academic credit for their internship. It's just not usually built into their academic curriculum. There is one undergraduate program, our public policy program, that does have that requirement. But other than that, most other programs at the undergraduate level are ones where the students are heavily encouraged to do an internship, but it's not a required part of their actual core curriculum. So, what does that mean? Basically, there's a couple things to keep in mind if you're going to offer academic credit or require academic credit for the student. So, the academic credit may not be real easy for them to coordinate through Duke. So they can actually go ahead and receive credit if they petition for an independent study through their academic program, which then just basically requires them to get a mentor on campus and set up a project that they're doing in addition to completing the internship, and they would get the credit that way. So it's not something that's actually, as easy as just, scheduling a class. So it's something that they have to, go about, and it does take some time for them to do that. So if that is a requirement of your internship, is the academic credit, just, let the students know that up front so they can begin the process early. Something else to keep in mind if you are requiring academic credit. So at Duke, they're typically, the students do have to pay for that credit, and they're paying Duke tuition for that credit. And most students' financial aid packages are not going to cover that credit because it's not part of the core curriculum. So again, something to keep in mind, if you are having a situation where you are thinking about requiring the credit, you might want to make it optional. So that way, if a student is in a financial situation where, they can't necessarily, have the funds to pay for that credit, they can still participate in the internship. So again, just some things to keep in mind as you are thinking about whether or not to offer credit. Moving on to the compensation. So compensation and the Department of Labor, they kind of go hand in hand. And just like internships can be for credit or non-credit, they can be paid or unpaid. So when you're deciding whether or not to make your position a paid opportunity, the first thing that we actually really suggest is that you become familiar with the U.S. Department of Labor's Fair Labor Standards Act. So, this is something that is a federal policy, and it basically regulates, what internships are, regarding the type of organization you are, the size of your organization, and the type of work that the student is going to be doing. And we're going to talk a lot more about this in just a second. But, we do want you to kind of just keep in mind that you want to make sure that you're following all regulations at a federal level first. And then if you are providing compensation, you can offer that in a couple of different ways. You can do it as an hourly wage. You can do it as a summer stipend. The pay rates, they vary depending upon the industry, skill levels that you're looking for, the location that you're in. If you're looking at offering some sort of compensation and you want some guidance, we're definitely here to help you with that. But if you're just trying to do some research on your own, we recommend that you start by looking at the starting pay rate for an entry-level position within the industry that's related to what the internship's doing. And then determine what the hourly wage for that entry-level position would be. And then you can adjust it based upon the skill and academic levels of the students that's going to be having that internship. So obviously, the higher the academic level, grad students, PhD students, they tend to have a more competitive rate, whereas maybe a lower level student, like a first year student or a sophomore student, may not have that same pay rate. So you can adjust that depending upon what the academic level is of the student. So we definitely understand that budgets are tight, especially in this current economic climate. So if you are in a situation where you can't offer compensation, we completely understand that. There are some benefits, though, if you are on that edge where you could or you could not offer compensation. So just to kind of go over what some of those benefits are, there's been a lot of studies on this recently, and paid internships are shown to have a stronger, more diverse candidate pool versus unpaid internships. And one of the reasons for that is that students who are more competitive, they have stronger skill sets, they tend to go more for the paid opportunities because they think that their skill set's more valuable in the workplace, whether or not that may be true. Another situation is that paid opportunities really allow for those students with financial need to pursue that opportunity. So by offering a wage to them, then you're taking that financial strain off of them that they might be otherwise feeling where they have to work for the summer. So they can actually focus on the internship versus a part-time job or a full-time job in the summer. Paid interns also tend to have shown to be more focused and more dedicated to their projects. And again, that's just because you're removing any distraction from the student. So they're not trying to figure out how to budget their time between the internship and their part-time job. They could just fully focus on their internship because their financial needs are being met. In addition, interns tend to feel more valued and more part of the organization's team, which then leads to more pride and more commitment from the student. And then finally, paid internships also have shown to lead to a higher acceptance rate if you're offering full-time positions after the internship experience. So those are just some of the things to keep in mind as you are moving through that process and deciding whether or not to make your internship a paid or unpaid experience. The last thing I want to mention just on this slide is funding assistance. So the Duke Career Center does coordinate an internship funding program, and that is a student program that provides undergraduate students financial assistance for living costs over the summer as they are pursuing an unpaid or low-paying internship. So if you're in a situation, and totally understand if your organization cannot support a paid internship, there is assistance for students through Duke. So we want to make sure that you're aware of that. So as you're talking to Duke students, if you're having an unpaid internship, you can really encourage them then to look into this internship funding program. The internship funding program provides the students with a stipend of $3,000 per summer. Now, it's not compensation for the work that they're doing at your organization, but rather it is living expenses support. So basically it's for those cost of living expenses that they might need, like rent or groceries, things like that. And it's basically the goal of that program is to help eliminate those costs so students can engage in more diverse types of experiences. And we'll talk more about that too in just a few minutes. So as I mentioned, I did recommend that we want you to really think about, what the federal government has to say regarding an unpaid internship with your organization. So we strongly suggest that you familiarize yourself with the Department of Labor's Fair Labor Standards Act, and the link to that act is here on this slide. Basically, this is this link goes to a fact sheet about that policy, and it really outlines whether compensation is required for an intern based upon the intern's role within your organization type, the size of your organization, the benefit of the intern for both the student and the employer, and a few other criteria. This actually gives you a six question quiz that you can take to determine whether or not you are federally required to offer compensation for your internship. But kind of as an overview, basically this says that if you are a for-profit organization of a certain size and that you have a certain amount of income that you generate every year, you're required to offer compensation. Now, if you are a nonprofit organization or a government organization or an organization that is for-profit but very small, maybe a very small startup, you are exempt from this policy. So as a nonprofit organization, you don't necessarily have to offer compensation based upon this legal requirement. If you are a for-profit organization, you definitely want to check out this policy and make sure that you can determine whether or not you have to offer some form of compensation. Sometimes people will look at this and they're thinking, what are some of, the types of compensation I can offer if I can't offer an hourly wage? And if that's a situation, you can always look at stipends, which can be actually a less amount of money than what an hourly wage is. So there are some different ways that you can offer compensation to a student without, having to do that hourly wage. So if this is a situation that you'd like to talk more about, definitely reach out to us. We can certainly assist you. So moving on, we're going to talk a little bit, as I mentioned, about the internship funding program, since it does go hand in hand with compensation. So again, this is a program for students who are pursuing unpaid or low-paying internships. And the program basically assists the students with their summer living expenses. So it is an application-based program that the student has to apply to. It's very similar to like a scholarship or a fellowship that they might receive. They receive a lump sum of money at the beginning of summer that they then can use for their living expenses throughout the summer while they're doing their internship. Now, this is a program that's only for undergraduate students. And for this summer, Duke has restricted any type of travel for undergraduate students due to the pandemic. So what that means is any student that's receiving Duke support for an internship, including our program that provides funding, has to be either a remote experience, a virtual experience, or it has to have the internship occur on Duke's campus. And the reason behind that is that Duke is trying to prevent community spread of COVID. So if the student is on campus doing their internship, they're going to be subjected to the ongoing testing that occurs through Duke. But if they're off campus, then Duke can't control that testing, and there's going to be an elevated possibility of the student either spreading COVID or coming in contact and contracting COVID. So this is a policy that was just implemented just a few weeks ago, and it's an ongoing type of discussion that's happening. So, based upon what summer is going to look like in terms of community health, on-campus internships may also be restricted at a point, or these restrictions might be loosened up a little bit. So if you are working with a student or are interested in hiring a student for an internship and it is unpaid, definitely encourage the student to look into the internship funding program. These are some of our, oh, I'm sorry. So, does somebody have a question? No, okay. Sorry, I was just getting some feedback. So these are some of the students in the past that have gotten some funding from us, and they have participated in all different types of experiences, all different types of organizations. And it's a really great opportunity for students to, again, engage in experiences that might not otherwise be possible to them just due to financial constraints. But again, if you are encouraging a student to participate in the internship funding program, just keep in mind that your experience does need to be either virtual or it needs to actually occur in person on Duke's campus. Okay, so let's just kind of pause here for a second and kind of refocus. So I gave you a lot of background information about Duke and how we approach internships, but the name of this was actually developing an impactful internship program. So let's kind of think a little bit more about not just what an internship is, but how do you take a good internship and make it into a transformative experience, for both the student and the organization? What makes it impactful? What's going to make it outstanding? And there's some best practices that we're going to cover here just to kind of give you some of that information, but it really comes down to planning and communication. So the first thing that we really want to encourage as you're developing your internship is to really kind of think about what is the purpose of the intern. Clear project definition is going to be key. So before you begin interviewing and hiring, we want you to take some time to really analyze what the goals are that you have for the intern. So a lot of times people will be like, oh, we're going to have an intern this summer. And then they kind of work backwards. They hire the student first, and then they try to figure out how are we going to use this student. I've actually been personally part of an internship like that. And although it was a great experience in the end, sometimes it gets a little confusing for the student and for the employer both. So some of the things that you want to think about, is like, what is your organization's hope to gain from the internship? Will this internship encompass one project, or will it be multiple little projects? What are the tools and workspace that's necessary for the intern? Can they do this remotely? Do they need to be on site? How many hours do they need to be on site? And then what are you looking for regards to the skill sets, the talents, the academic background of the student? Are you looking at an undergrad student, or are you looking for more for like a graduate student or an advanced student? So deciding upon the qualifications early in the process will actually help you select the best candidates. So we want you to kind of start at that beginning and really think through what you're hoping to get out of this student as an intern. The second thing that goes hand in hand with that is once you have an idea about what you want to share that with your organization. So internship programs that are the strongest are the ones that have buy-in from the entire organization. So, just like it takes a village to raise a child, it will take your entire organization to fully develop your internship program. So organizations who entirely embrace their internship programs are going to be the employers who provide the best experience for the student, and in turn then get the best output from that student. So you're going to get the most out of your interns. So we recommend that you communicate your objectives of your program to your organization, solicit some feedback from your coworkers, employees who contribute to the program. They feel more invested in it. They feel more connected with the effort, which then will make the program more holistic and provide a student with an enhanced experience. So really trying to get that buy-in so everyone is on board with having an intern for the summer or an internship program in general. Mentoring and supervision, in addition to defining your project, another step you really want to determine before you advertise and hire a student is figuring out like who's going to be primarily responsible for this intern. Is it going to be a mentor? Is it going to be a supervisor? Will they be a trainer? Will they be all of the above? Who's going to be what role is going to be handled by who in the organization? Also figuring out, are you going to offer a formal training program, or is it going to be more hands-on? Same with mentoring. Is it going to be a formal program? Is it going to be something that's more casual? By having that decided up front, then you're guaranteeing, first of all, that you're going to have those components to the internship program, but also it just helps facilitate the program more smoothly for the organization. And then collaborating on learning objectives. So I mentioned before, internships are a two-way street. Your organization should have clear goals in mind when you hire your interns, but also realize that the interns are going to be entering the experience with some of the goals of their own. So when you're developing your learning outcomes, really actively involve your interns in that process. Program outcomes should be mutually beneficial. That is something that the Department of Labor stresses as an intern program. The company shouldn't just be the only one benefiting from the experience. It should be mutually beneficial for both parties. So when the employer invites the student to contribute to establishing what their objectives are, the student's going to feel more valued. They're going to have more ownership about the experience, and it's just going to make them feel more connected. And again, overall, just enhancing the internship for both the student and the employer both. Going hand in hand with that, clear communication and feedback. This is something that, think about your own experiences. The best way that you learn is by getting clear objectives, clear directions, and getting that feedback. So once you determine your projects and your learning objectives, your supervision structure, communicate that to the interns very clearly. Encourage the students to ask questions, or clarify things if they're confused. Some of these interns, depending upon their academic level, this could be their first real job experience. So making it welcoming for them to ask questions is going to be very critical. Provide students with clear deadlines and objectives, so that way they know what is expected when, and then help them if they need to break a large project into smaller projects so it's more digestible for them and isn't as overwhelming. Provide feedback to your interns on their progress, and offer, don't hesitate to offer that constructive insights for them. That's how they're going to learn. That's how they're going to be shaped into a professional. But also, be sure to check in with your interns too. So see how they're feeling, see how the experience is going for them. By asking the interns for their feedback, you can identify exactly the type of support that they need. And really, in the end, you're actively helping them be successful and helping your program be successful at the same time. So you're making your overall, internship program and the overall organization stronger as a result of that. So having that open communication. Also, try to, integrate their ideas or tell them how their ideas are going to be integrated. So, just like you and me, the interns are going to love to know how their ideas are being implemented or how they're impacting the organization. If the intern is not going to be there to see the final project being completed, share the vision of what their work is going to be doing. How is it going to be impacting the organization or the goals for the project? Nothing is worse than not knowing, why you're working on something or how it's going to contribute. By reinforcing back to them what the vision is, again, they're going to feel more valued and enhancing their ownership over that project. So again, making that a good experience. And then consider integrating some networking opportunities into your internship program as well. So things like, an intern orientation or lunch and learns, or even just informal meetings with staff and leadership can definitely help provide the interns, with a bonding experience. They're going to be bonding with each other. They're going to be bonding with your staff. They're going to expand their knowledge of the organization and the industry. And really, you're helping them begin building their professional network. And as part of their professional network, you're also then building your professional network as well. So it's kind of a win-win. So those are some of the best practices that we've noticed just about what makes a very impactful internship. So it's not going to be a big surprise when I talk about what Duke students are looking for. It's going to be a reflection basically of these things. So what do Duke students want from an internship? I talk to students all the time about what they're looking for. And, you get all kinds of answers, but hands down, the most common answer is they're looking for impact. They want to make a contribution. Perks like being paid or having free lunches or snacks or things like that. That's great. Of course, they're going to love that. But what they really want is they want to have an experience where they can own a project. Duke students want to get their hands dirty. They want to get in there and make a contribution that they can be proud of. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for those, experiences that isn't just supervising and watching and observing, but rather let them get in there, let them help solve problems, let them own a project. They're seeking out experiences that they can contribute to for the organization while also building on fundamental skills, and professional experience that they're going to gain that will then elevate their candidacy as they transition into more professional positions. So that's basically what they're looking for. They're also looking for that opportunity to network, to build relationships within the industry and within your organization. That's also very important to them. So as the coordinator of the internship funding program, I talk a lot with those students as they're going through their summer. And I recently had a discussion with the students from last summer about how their experience could be improved. And, last summer was a little different for everybody, right? So it was interesting to hear what they had to say. Basically, the main theme of their answer was relationship building. Last year was unique. Organizations had to pivot last minute to even save their summer programs, right? And through no fault of their own, they flipped a lot of their in-person programs into virtual experiences with little lead time. And they were really kind of working off the cuff with that. And, our students understood that and they really appreciated still having summer experiences because that was something that, is extremely valuable to them and they really appreciated that. So when I asked them how it could be improved, they mentioned, although they understood why, they just wished that they had more time to build relationships because it was a little more challenging to do that on their own in a virtual world. So even if your internship is virtual, having some of that networking or collaboration or just bonding time integrated into that, the project is going to be something that Duke students will really appreciate and really look for. So I gave you a lot of information and I'm sorry about that because I know it came at you all at one time. The good news is this is being recorded, so you could always access it at a later date if you need to. But if you don't take anything else away from this, please take away this. We are here to help you. We are a resource. So the Duke Career Center, we're here to help you whether you're looking for best practice information or, we're here to help facilitate connections to students. We're happy to work with you to help develop and promote your internship descriptions and programs. So, if you are at the very beginning and you just want to brainstorm what can an intern do for your organization, we can help you with that. If you need help translating that onto paper into an actual description, we can assist with that. Marketing, we can certainly help with. We have a job portal called Career Connections, and that's where we can post positions and direct students to those positions to apply. So it is basically a job hub or a communication hub between you and students. We offer a variety of experiences that can be a touch point for you with students from all different academic levels, from the first year undergraduate student through the PhD student. If you're looking for networking, we offer career fairs, we have formal networking events. We actually have a diversity networking event coming up here in March, as an example. This year, we've done a lot of virtual job fairs, career fairs. So, there are different options out there. If you're looking more for like a one-on-one connection with students, we can coordinate coffee chats with you and students. We have some new programs that are more focused on first-year students and sophomore students called First Contact and Sophomore Conversations. But that's where you can start building those relationships with the younger students. So that way, again, you're elevating your brand on campus and maybe even offering up opportunities to the students at an earlier level in their education. Once you're ready to interview, we can certainly assist you also with setting up interviews, whether that be a virtual interview or if you want to come once we're back on campus, you can come into our space and we actually have interviewing rooms that are available that you can access. So in order to increase your awareness too on campus, we also offer things like workshops and panel discussions on different topics. So we can always integrate you into those as well if you're just looking for more of a branding touch point with students. So we definitely have a lot of different options available to you. There's going to be a one-page handout that we developed with some key information from this presentation. And on that is going to be the website for the Duke Career Center, where you can go to and look at all of our employer services that are available. So right now in spring, all of our services are available to you virtually. We're not really sure what fall is going to look like at this point. A lot of it will depend upon just, the current, health conditions for public health in the campus. So, but we will definitely keep you guys updated on whether or not we'll be offering on campus in-person experiences as well as the virtual experiences. So, but just keep in mind, we're definitely here as a resource. We want to help you. We love working with employers of all different types of industries. So don't ever hesitate to reach out. Okay, so just looking at your next steps. So our recommendation for next steps is really just a summary of what we already talked about. Developing your goals and projects for the internship program, getting the buy-in from your organization, determining how the interns will be supervised, determining evaluation and feedback processes for them, identifying details like the pay, the work schedules, the total number of hours for the internship. So once you have that all decided, then it's time to put it to paper, creating your internship description and then marketing the program. And again, we can assist you with that, collecting your applications, and then finally interviewing and extending your offers. So those will be your next steps. And as a reminder, our staff is definitely here to assist you every step of the way with that. So we are definitely a resource and we would definitely love to collaborate with you on your internship program. So, don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, so we are coming up on our time, so I want to make sure that we have some time available for questions and answers. So please feel free to either unmute and ask your question, or you can certainly just pop them into the chat. my lovely colleague Monique is here, and she's going to be monitoring the chat box for us. So we're definitely available to answer any questions that you might have.
Great job. Thank you, Leanne. Our first question in the chat from Aaron is, in normal years, do Duke students have access to on-campus housing if they are doing an internship in the local community?
So in past years, I believe that they have to be enrolled somehow in a Duke-sponsored program to have access to student housing. This year, they absolutely have access to student housing, even if they are doing a virtual internship. So that is something that is new for this year. And again, it's just a step that the university took to try to, just maintain what we call the Duke bubble. So the students will be engaging in regular COVID testing and just making sure that it is a safe environment for them. So this year, they definitely have access to that. So if you're hosting a student intern, they can certainly live on campus. Any other questions? Well, while you're thinking, I do just want to reiterate, definitely reach out if you think of questions as you're going through this process. My information is located on this slide. Again, my name is Leanne Waring, and you have my email address there, as well as the regular website for the Career Center. Once you're on the Career Center's website, you can navigate through different resources that are available and different events that are being sponsored by the Career Center, as well as connect with any of our staff. So, definitely a valuable resource for you as well. Okay, well, if there's no other questions.
Let me ask you one
sure.
question.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, this is Delphi. The presentation that you've done today, we would find it at this website, Duke Student Affairs at duke.edu?
Great question. So yes, we will be taking the presentation and making it available online on our website. So it should be available.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
And first of all, thank you very much, Leanne and Monique, and I'm very grateful that all of you are here. I am Sandra Martinez Zuniga. I am the one that has been sending all the emails. And I will also be sending a post-event email with this information.
Thank you, Sandra. And special thank you to Sandra for all the communication that she's maintained for this event. So we definitely appreciate her partnership. All right, well, if there's no other questions, thank you very much for attending today. I hope that you found this helpful, and I'm looking forward to working with you. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, and I hope you have a wonderful day.